Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Kicking off second presentation of the morning. Appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Blaine Parker. I'm an invasive species biologist with the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. And today we're going to focus on some priority freshwater aquatic species of concern to the Columbia River Basin. So as most of you are well aware of, the Columbia River Basin is the largest river system in North America, or in the United States, after the Mississippi. It historically hosted the world's largest runs of salmon and steelhead. The native fish assembly, which is rather sparse compared to a lot of other river systems in the United States and North America, with just 34 native species. Today, the river is largely a series of reservoirs that are controlled by 14 main stem dams in the United States and Canada. And today's salmon and steelhead runs are a fraction of the tens of millions of fish that historically utilizes the Columbia River system as their home. And the tribes that I work with, that's their primary goal, is restoring these fish runs. Today, we have more than 45 species of non-native fish that live in the Columbia that interact directly with and affect the restoration of these native species. And there's dozens of non-native macrophytes and invertebrates also found in the Columbia River, which add to the complexity of the situation. Today, just really quickly, what are invasive species? They are species that are not endemic, and they negatively impact the habitat or inhabitants. Here's a picture of a native mussel that is the upper part that would be exposed from the riverbed, covered with what appear to be zebra mussels. At such point, sorry for the bells in the background, I'm at my dad's house. The mussel can't even respirate, can't even open and close its valves anymore. Impacts are often not readily available, often are slow and almost imperceptible. It's kind of like a slow-moving fire that suddenly one day you look around and they're everywhere. As I mentioned, they can be dormant for years or even decades until environmental conditions are such that the species are allowed to proliferate. The ones we're going to focus on today are dracidid mussels, quagga and zebras, flowering rush, northern pike, viral hemorrhagic septicemia, that's a mouthful. And note that we have established populations of rush and pike in the system. And as most of you are well aware, we did have a outbreak of quaggas in the Snake River last year, which I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes. Okay, dracidid mussels, quaggas and zebras. They're native to the Black and Caspian Sea regions, introduced to the Great Lakes in the early 1980s via ballast water from transcontinental shipping from Europe. They spread rather rapidly, although they were probably in the Great Lakes in the 70s because it is so vast, before somebody actually did the right form of sampling and found them in the Lake St. Clair region. But once they were documented, people were finding them everywhere. They spread rapidly through most of the U.S. via foul recreational and commercial craft, and also just spreading downstream through waterways. They're a fairly dynamic individual. They're not very big. Most of them aren't much bigger than your thumbnail, but a mussel that small can filter a liter of water a day. Consequently, that cleansing of the periphyton, algae, and zooplankton from the system can create dramatic effects to native fauna, both directly, such as this crayfish down the corner, which is probably not even going to be able to shed its shell. Those are all zebra mussels on that crayfish, same as the mussel in the middle. And the other thing is it really disrupts the actual ecological processes in the water systems they're in. The top picture, the light green around the peripheral edges of this lake, I believe this is Lake Erie, those are toxic algae blooms. So these mussels can selectively feed on not periphyton, but zooplankton, phytoplankton, but they can actually spit out the zooplankton that is the toxic algae, which are the cyanobacteria. So that actually accelerates and concentrates those algae blooms. Distribution, this is actually a couple-year-old map. It's a little fuzzy, sorry about that. Everything in the orange, yellowish, that is quagga mussels. They're found now clear across the country, down into California, the Colorado River system. There was a couple of reports in Montana, but those have not since come to fruition. They were definitely found, but they have not taken. All the green is zebra mussels. And what's very interesting to note, you see the outlines of the Great Lakes in yellow, because the quaggas that came in after the fact, they actually displaced zebra mussels. And essentially you don't find zebra mussels in the Great Lakes anymore, even though 20 years ago they were full of zebra mussels. The quaggas have outcompeted them. They can tolerate colder temperatures and they can live at much greater depths. So the measures that we're doing to protect the Columbia River system are extensive and very prolonged. We've had boat inspection stations throughout Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington for a number of years. I think Idaho is it's been over 20 years since they've had boat inspection stations. Most of them are active starting in early to mid-February now through the end of October. And that's to catch any boats that would be coming from zebra mussel infested waters. Zebra mussels and quagga mussels can tolerate fairly cold temperatures, even if they're out of the water, provided they stay moist. So once November hits, it's generally out to be cold enough that a contaminated boat, the mussels would freeze on the boat and no longer be a threat. And we have hundreds of monitoring sites throughout the basin. Most monitoring sites are a static object, often a piece of PVC pipe with some mesh in it, that are in place on numerous boat docks, dams, and recreational sites throughout the Columbia River Basin. And they're checked regularly by volunteers and staff from cooperating agencies, tribes, and NGOs. We have had rapid response plans with regular drills with state, federal, and tribal partners over the last 15 years, in which we actually have a drill to simulate an actual infestation. And that sort of work has helped out quite a bit with the recent event finding quagga mussels in the Snake River. And as always, outreach and education and prevention is our best bet. Clean, drain, and dry is our motto. It's a different world now. Quaggas were discovered in the Snake River in September of 2023. Within a month, the Idaho Department of Ag led a control action, should be more of an eradication action that involved hundreds of people, thousands of gallons of chelated copper. And it was a direct muscicide injection into the Snake River above and below the site where the animals were found. They actually had one adult sentinel organism, adult quagga mussel, that was they found it underwater via divers. They kept it in a container and they confirmed that it died utilizing the concentration of 1 part per million over a 72-hour period. There was actually 2 separate applications separated by a 3-day period to make sure they got everything. And the treatment was effective for 16 miles of Snake River from the point of origin downstream. And there was significant impacts to the ecosystem. There was a lot of fish that were killed. It killed aquatic plants, other mussels and snails. And it was a very draconian effort, but it was very necessary. That was an opportunity to stop something before it became too established to control. There will be significant increased veliger sampling and as well as other types of sampling looking for quagga mussels downstream of this site for the next 5 years. That's tend to be our period of time in which we utilize to make sure that we've not had a population established and start up again. And from the time of the first detection to the eradication was about a 6-week period, necessitated by confirmation that we actually had them, that it wasn't a one-off, and they were, actively releasing, spawning, and veligers were being produced, although they were very low in numbers. The samples would only find a few individuals at a time. So fingers crossed that we got them. Switching over to northern pike, well-established non-native predator in the upper Columbia River system upstream of Grand Coulee Dam in what's known as Lake Roosevelt. They're also found in Canada. We have not detected them yet in the anadromous zone. Northern pike are highly predatory, even from a small size. There's a pike in the top photo with a standard fillet knife kind of in the background there, and those little tiny fish are baby sockeye salmon. And there's dozens, if probably not close to 100 in that fish's stomach. They can eat fish that are more than half their body length. So in Lake Roosevelt, we have kokanee salmon, which are essentially the same size as our migrating sockeye salmon. And it's common to find northern pike with whole kokanee salmon in their stomachs. There's tremendous monitoring effort going on downstream, looking for pike and also being ready to do. And there's also a lot of control efforts managing them pretty effectively now in Lake Roosevelt, Pend Oreille Lake and Kalispells, and the states of Washington and the Colville tribes. They're all doing their part to keep these animals down to a low level. The Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, myself and my colleague Denise Kelsey, we have a very ambitious environmental DNA monitoring that goes from Bonneville all the way to Priest Rapids, and we've been out last year and be out this year as well looking, and we have not found any yet. So fingers crossed that they haven't become established downriver of Grand Coulee Dam.
Blaine, just about 3 minutes left.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm getting close. Management and monitoring. The targeted spring and summer gillnetting in Lake Roosevelt and Pend Oreille River have removed tens of thousands of pike since 2014, and it's greatly reduced the overall densities from pre-management levels. But while this form of management is successful, it has to be conducted on a regular basis. Hence the picture of the guy trying to mow grass that hasn't been mowed. You know, if you let it go, it's going to get really big, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to take it down. By continually staying on these fish year after year after year, you're mowing the grass, you're keeping it short, you're allowing the fish community to restore at some pre-invasion level, in which case the pike are kind of in the background and they're not actually changing the ecosystem and the fish fauna assemblage. Flowering rush is an ecosystem engineering plant. It's a herbaceous aquatic perennial monocot, and it's the only species in this family, Udamaceae, and it's found sparingly throughout its native range, but it's become established in North America, likely escaped from water gardens in the Columbia River and the Snake region many years ago. It can inhabit water from the shoreline to depths of 6 meters. Because it grows so thick, it actually can slow flowing water down. It increases water temperatures and changes nutrient transfer mechanism. And there's 7 different genotypes in North America, but our population in the West is dominated by a triploid variety. Really quickly, viral hemorrhagic septicemia is a pretty scary thing because it's a lethal viral disease that affects many species of marine and freshwater fish. It's been known in European hatcheries for many years, but it was actually first documented in the 80s in returning Pacific salmon to Puget Sound. That strain 4B is most prevalent in the Great Lakes and has been known since 2005 and has killed millions of fish of 25 different species. So this would be very dramatic if this virus was somehow introduced into the Columbia River, because about every fish we have would be susceptible to viral hemorrhagic septicemia. And there's no cure for this. It just runs its course. So looking to the future, as I wrap this up, invasive species, they're a foreseeable threat as far as I can see out in the horizon. Prevention funding needs to be commensurate with increases in the magnitude of the problem. As populations become moved around and established, we need more and more funding to try to minimize the threats of that and being able to respond rapidly in the case of an invasion. Increased awareness of user groups, the public, fishers, recreational agency staff, and enforcement needs to be maximized in order to keep this on the front of everybody's brain in the ascent, so that you're always thinking about invasive species and what we can do to inform people and make sure that these species do not continue to come into our systems. Increased outreach and education messaging and the greater flexibility of rapid response actions are critical in order to keep preserving the ecosystem of the Columbia River from invasive species. With that, I'm not sure if I could take a question or two. I'll be on till about 10 o'clock, and then I have to take off because I'm actually traveling today. So thank you very much for your time.